Assyrian concepts of religion. Assyrian religion is often described as a magical religious system which stems from the deeply rooted fear of evil spirits and other incomprehensible elements of the ancient world. The majority of the Assyrian gods were very unlike the benevolent gods we are familiar with in contemporary religions. They provoked fear in the believers, and people served and praised them not only to gain their favour, but also to avoid their anger. Despite often fearing their gods, the Assyrians did often turn to them for help in all sorts of matters, ranging from assistance in battle to assistance in child labour. The Assyrian Pantheon. The main god of the Assyrian pantheon and the representative of the Assyrian state was Ashur, who was usually symbolised by a blazing star. When in anthropomorphic form, Ashur was often portrayed winged and armed with a bow and arrow, and therefore held military significance. Ashur featured in no narrative myths and was quite distant from humanity. He is often described as the equivalent of the god Zeus in the Greek pantheon. The main Assyrian goddess was Ishtar. She often featured in two forms, Ishtar of Nineveh and Ishtar of Arbela. She was a goddess of war and sexuality, and was a consort of Ashur. Ishtar was often represented as a primal force for conflict, bringing clash and chaos with her wherever she went. Shamash was a sun god and was also often associated with justice, truth and order. He was also one of the oldest gods in the Assyrian pantheon, having origins in ancient Sumer as the god Utu. Nabu was a god of wisdom and was therefore favoured by the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal, who founded the Library of Ashurbanipal. Ninurta was a hero god of war. He was originally an agricultural deity, but as Assyria became increasingly militarised, Ninurta's role also began to morph into a more militarised one.
Let's talk about Mesopotamian rituals. Rituals were an integral part of life in Mesopotamian culture. The Mesopotamians practiced rituals to appease the gods, as they believed mankind was created to serve the gods, and if they did not, they would suffer evil. As long as the gods were happy, man was protected. An important ritual with two stages in Mesopotamian religion was the Mispi, washing of the mouth ceremony, and the Pitpi, opening of the mouth ceremony, where the spirit of the god was infused into its new divine idol. The washing of the mouth purified the cult image from any human contamination, and the opening of the mouth enabled the statue to do things like eat, drink water, or smell incense. The ritual would begin with the transportation of the statue from the workshop where it was created to a specifically built reed hut in an orchard on the riverbank. In this hut, the statue would be ritually purified and become a living god. After the ritual was complete, the god would be transported and installed in its temple sanctuary. If a statue was irreparably damaged, the god could be considered dead, and mourning would begin. If the statue could be repaired, then a renewal ceremony would take place. The desecration or removal of a divine statue was a devastating event for the city, since it was believed the city was left unprotected, as the god no longer dwelt in the city. The severity of violating divine idols can be seen when Sennacherib's sons assassinated the king in 681 BCE, probably because of his sacrilege in destroying the city of Babylon and carrying off the statue of the great god Marduk. So what happened to these divine statues of the gods? Once constructed and the deity had taken their place in his or her statue through the Mispi and Pitpi rituals, the god had to be attended to keep it content. The temple where the idol resided became like the house of the deity, where the god lived with family and servants, and ate and drank and slept and was entertained. The temple was therefore equipped like a house, with the essential kitchen for meals, sleeping rooms with beds, as well as a courtyard with water for cleansing visitors and a stable for the animals. Image was even dressed in ornate clothing and jewellery. Chests were filled with gold rings, necklaces, pendants and other ornaments that adorned their garments. The deity was fed 2 banquets a day. A curtain was drawn before the table while the idol ate, just as the king himself was not allowed to be seen by the masses while he ate. The king shared in these meals occasionally. Incense was burned before the image, as it was believed the gods enjoyed the smell, and music was accompanied to keep the god entertained. All of these activities were done to ensure the favour of the gods.
One way that we can learn about rituals which were practiced in ancient Mesopotamia is by looking at a variety of modern worship practices. One in particular which illuminates comparisons between modern and ancient rituals is the Hare Krishna movement, which is an international society for Krishna consciousness. The Hare Krishna temple in Cardiff, T. Krishna, highlighted how people living in the 21st century can try to understand ancient rituals and concepts of divinity through their own religious rituals. The Hare Krishna monks and young devotees would wake up at 4 a.m. in order to dress and wake the deity. This involved wrapping scarves around them as well as jewellery. Similarly, in Assyria, the image was dressed. Another element of worship in T. Krishna, which we can link with ancient Assyria, involved offerings to the god. A major way this was done was through food. They believed that the offering of food was an act of love and a spiritual act of giving. While they explain that the god does not actually consume the food, unlike in ancient Mesopotamia where they believe the god does, the devotees eat it after it's been offered. They explain that much like the god can listen with his heart, he can also eat with his eyes. Apart from food offerings, there were other types of offerings and rituals present in T. Krishna, one of which was the burning of incense. Incense is used in T. Krishna not only to create a more relaxing, stress-free atmosphere, but from ancient Assyrian sources we can also learn about why it's used in modern practice. The scribe of the gods, often the reconciler of Horus and Seth, speaks while a last anointment is taking place. Take thou fragrance from the gods, sense thy face with it, so it can be fragrant through and through. This shows that sensing occurs because it fumes a divine substance. In most countries of antiquity, the gods revealed themselves through not only sight and hearing, but also through the sense of smell. The historian Henry Frankfurt makes the assumption from this that incense partakes in the essence of the gods. We also witness this in Krishna consciousness. Finally, chanting also plays a large role in the T. Krishna temple. It's perhaps the most recognised Krishna consciousness practice, known as Kirtan or Sankirtan. Devotees chant not only to attract new members of the movement, but also to call for the gods. When they wake at 4 in the morning, they will chant so they can wake up the gods. They will also chant 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna a day. This is called Japa. This was also practiced in ancient Assyria. Assyrians would chant for the god's attention and during worship. Therefore, we can see that Krishna consciousness shows us the tradition of chanting has survived since the ancient Assyrian days and gives us a sense of why people in antiquity would chant.
Throughout history and religion, there has been much worship of statues and deities. However, in addition to this, war, in all its forms, has also arisen from religious practices and the worship of certain deities. This in turn has led to the destruction of precious monuments and the erosion of important historical temples and religious statues. From the conquest of Tukulti-Ninurta to the modern-day movement of ISIS, much of Assyrian antiquity has been lost. The army played a big part in Assyrian history. You couldn't get away from it. Assyria, as Lord Byron identified, was one of the most militaristic societies the world has ever known and also the most violent. Its policy was aggressively expansionist, subsuming smaller states, imposing tribute and also inflicting violence and the use of terror as propaganda. Tukulti-Ninurta I expanded the borders of the Assyrian Empire through aggressive conquest. When he marched his army south and sacked the city of Babylon, he took the Kassite king into captivity. When the Babylonians rebelled against Tukulti-Ninurta, his response was to ransack their religious temples, and even took possession of the statue of the city's patron deity Marduk. This was of course seen as religious sacrilege to both the Babylonians and Assyrians alike. This religious destruction and violent warfare can still be seen today through the modern-day movement of ISIS. The damage and violent warfare that went on in the city of Mosul, the ancient city of Nimrod, can never be taken back. Again, the ideas of religion and the worship of certain gods somehow justifies the destruction of ancient monuments for ISIS. In Islam, shirk is the sin of idolatry and polytheism, i.e. the deification or worship of anyone or anything else besides God, and for ISIS that god is Allah. The Islamic State is trying to establish their legitimacy as the proper heirs to the legacy of earlier destroyers of idols, including the prophets Abraham and Muhammad. In the clip I am about to show you, a jihadi states, "God has honoured us here in the Islamic State and helped us to destroy anything that used to be worshipped besides God in ancient days."
Now on to cross-cultural comparisons, namely Catholicism and its relationship with idol worship. So what is it? Idol worship, by definition, is the worship of an object as a deity. This was forbidden by God in the Early Testament, as stated in the Second Commandment, which banned the worship of statues and idols of any kind, due to their God being a jealous God that said, "Do not turn to idols or make for yourselves molten gods. I am the Lord your God." The topic was controversial for a long time within the early church, so controversial in fact that a council was required to settle the matter. Nowadays, statue worship is permitted, just so long as you don't worship the statue itself. This may be a bit confusing to get your head around, but let me explain it. Back before cameras allowed pictures like they do today, Catholics made statues as a way of looking at God. It's not the statue they're looking at and worshipping, it's the soul and the spirit of the deity the statue is modelled after, much like how you carry a photo of a loved one in your wallet. In Catholicism, the object itself is immoral. It's down to the eye of the beholder whether it's good or bad, or how they use and worship it. If a church worships a statue as though their God resides within it, it is considered idol worship and therefore improper. This is where the lines become blurred with pagan idol worship, which is the worship of an object as though it contains the deity. So are they the same? Not at all. This is where statue and idol worship differs for Catholic and Mesopotamian religions. Assyrians believed that their deities resided within the statues they created, clothing them, feeding them, and the washing of the mouth to invoke the deity to enter the object so that they may worship it. In Catholicism, this is considered directly opposing their God's wishes, as stated in the Old Testament. Instead, they worship their God through the statue and not the statue itself.
When it comes to comparing various cultures across such a vast period of time, there are going to be benefits and pitfalls. Fortunately, there are plenty of materials from Assyria, but how can we truly understand a culture from just these sources? Comparing cultures can be complex, especially when looking at ancient civilizations. It's very easy to weigh up other societies based on our own standards and beliefs to reach our own understanding and conclusions. Therefore, we must consider that if these societies and beliefs are so different and we are analysing from a modern perspective, if they can truly be compared and apply all ideas of anthropology. Early on in the video, we can see that the Assyrians feared their gods and their worship was very much to please them in order to maintain order and well-being to their civilization. From our experience as a T. Krishna, they similarly give offerings, but this is done more as an act of love and devotions. However, each faith believes their representations of deities embodies their soul, and each faith, even though different in their own right, all believes holds a divine essence and uses these representations for worship and prayer. It is clear there are similarities, and understanding one faith's worship can give us some insight and understanding in how the ancient Assyrians saw their faith. However, it cannot be truly understood because of the pitfalls of viewing it from a modern perspective and not experiencing the full effect and atmosphere of the worship at the time.